So what is on your radar, Robby?
Well, enough is enough. We need to end the mask mandates for schools. I've been saying this for weeks and months, of course, but now many in the mainstream media are finally admitting that the time has indeed come, and frankly, I'm relieved. Masks can't go away fast enough. Our children shouldn't have to wait any longer. Indeed, we're starting to see evidence trickling in that masks can be harmful for kids in a variety of scenarios. Speech therapists, for instance, are noting that very young kids who have been masked or spent most of their developmental time watching adults who are masked are experiencing learning setbacks. Jacqueline Thieck, a speech therapist in Florida, said that during the pandemic, her clinic has seen a large increase in the number of patients who are babies and toddlers. We've seen a 364% patient increase in referrals of babies and toddlers from pediatricians and parents, she said in that article. All the way back in December of 2020, an article published in the Journal of Head and Neck Surgery warned that preventative practices such as mask wearing, social distancing, virtual meetings, and classrooms to address contagion concerns may negatively affect communication, particularly in the pediatric population. Well, it's now January of 2022, and many school-age children have not seen their classmates and teachers' faces in 2 years. There's no way that it isn't causing problems, that isn't making learning, communication, and socialization more difficult. In fact, health agencies, not U.S. health agencies, but other ones, understand that constant masking of children was an unreasonable and unhealthy requirement. The World Health Organization recommends against masks for the 5 and under crowd. But even for kids aged 6 to 11, the WHO worries about the potential impact of wearing a mask on learning and psychosocial development. And the WHO says not to mask children who are running or exercising, in stark contrast to what's happening in U.S. schools where kids still wear masks while playing outside. We know that school-age children have fallen miserably behind during the pandemic in terms of math and reading scores. We don't know how much of that is masks versus virtual school, lockdowns, everything else. Probably all of these measures took a substantial toll on children's education needs. But today, mask mandates are the most stubborn requirement for schools. About half of the U.S.'s 50 million children are attending a school currently where masking is still required. Some Republican political officials are fighting that. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin is making it his mission to compel the state's school districts to let families choose whether kids wear masks, but the districts are fighting back hard. The mainstream and progressive media has remained a force of ironclad support for vigorous masking of children. But that consensus opinion is finally beginning to erode. Yesterday, I noticed this article in The Atlantic, The Case Against Masks in Schools. The article talks at some length about the potential harms of masking children that I've just outlined. Quote, recent prospective studies from Greece and Italy found evidence that masking is a barrier to speech recognition, hearing, and communication, and that masks impede children's ability to decode facial expressions, dampening children's perceived trustworthiness of faces. Research has also suggested that hearing-impaired children have difficulty discerning individual sounds. Opaque masks, of course, prevent lip reading. Some teachers, parents, and speech pathologists have reported that masks can make learning difficult for some of America's most vulnerable children, including those with cognitive delays, speech and hearing issues, and autism. Masks may also hinder language and speech development, especially important for students who do not speak English at home. Masks may impede emotional recognition, even in adults, but particularly in children. This fall, when children were asked, many said that prolonged mask wearing is uncomfortable and that they dislike it, end quote. That article also questions whether mask mandates are actually effective at stopping the spread of COVID-19. It notes that the 3 studies cited by the Centers for Disease Control in support of school mask mandates are all horribly flawed. They don't take into account different vaccination rates and had other problems as well. Now, the Washington Post is getting there too, slowly. They're getting there. The newspaper had an article yesterday calling on schools to make masks optional. Quote, the old mantra, my mask protects you and your mask protects me, is obsolete, the author of that column wrote. As a result, schools can finally safely make masks optional for students and staff. And I say amen. It's time to end mask mandates for schools. It's now or never, quite literally. Because I'm afraid if the authorities don't soon admit we don't have to do this, they might never admit it. There's just too much buy-in to the concept. Now, there will always be some outbreak somewhere, some new threat, some new concern, new variants. We can't let our children languish because of it. No longer. You with me, Batya?
I'm so totally with you. It's so distressing to see those little children with their little masks. Help me understand this, Robby, because people ask me this all the time and I come up with all these reasons, but I don't quite understand it. Why why have the people that the sort of mask COVID zero people, like it's like they've chosen who to care about and who not to care about. And in the category of people that they don't care about, it's disabled people, deaf people who can't read lips, blind people who can't hear through the mask, and children. ESL, children who don't speak English. So immigrants who they claim to care about, children who don't speak English can now, no longer tell what their teacher's trying to teach them. Like, why?
Children with autism, children with some kind of learning disability.
Totally. I have a friend who has an autistic daughter, and she comes home, the mask is she's so miserable, and you should see, it's horrific. How is it that the people who are supposed to be on the side of the vulnerable were so comfortable sacrificing all these people on the altar of these like cloth masks that we now know do nothing except harm children?
Right.
Like, what is your explanation for that?
Right. When Rand Paul said the cloth masks do nothing, he gets kicked off YouTube.
Right, exactly.
Then when the CDC says, well, the cloth masks don't do anything, then it has to be established scientific fact. It's declared.
So what's your explanation for it? Because I really struggle to understand this.
I know. If I was like a right-wing talking head person, I'd say, well, they hate your children about you. They hate them. But that's the children have no lobbying group to fight for their rights or speak on their behalf, except their own outraged parents who have tried to kind of take back power where they can. That's very much kind of what happened in our Virginia governor's race. Yeah, and often public policy is made at the level of, well, what about the children? We can't have any children be harmed. And this was a weird case where, well, this policy is harming the children more than the children are being harmed by the coronavirus. I mean, and obviously anyone dying is bad, but you know as well as I do that the severe outcome rate for the very young from COVID is very low. Is not more significant than any other disease really. And yet they're suffering in terms of their social situation and their grades, their math scores. Like, we're just beginning to see that.
And it's not like liberals are big on like discipline and structure in general. So it's people who like would never ordinarily set boundaries for their children, but they're forcing them to wear these horrible masks that I struggle to understand it. I'm so glad that you brought this up and are shining a light on this, and I'm very glad to see the backlash starting.
It's finally starting, at least for the kids. I hope it's for the rest of us too. Muriel Bowser, our mayor in D.C., I just read this last night, has extended her emergency authority. Of course, leaders love extending their emergency authority, and our mask mandate is now supposed to last until, I guess, the end of February. Even though by then cases will be again back to nothing because the Omicron wave is receding, and it's enforced. Everything here is enforced by. It's interesting because it's like the police are not forcing masks on your kids. They're not arresting you for not wearing a mask. It's not any of that. We're living in this like moment of the Karen moment, the snitch culture moment, where your fellow citizen is reporting you for not following the rules, or your kid their mask is beneath their nose. You got to get that mask up. Like that's what other people are doing.
I do have to say we have seen something in New York, which is anti-mask, anti-vaccine mandate activists going to restaurants and essentially forcing the working class people, the hostess, the waiter, and then police officers to deal with their activism, and that really does not sit right by me. I don't like being asked for my vaccine card when I go to a restaurant, but I'm not going to force some working class person working a minimum wage job to be the front line of my activism. Come on, like have a little respect.
No, you're right, and I feel bad. I know it's not. They don't want to do this.
They don't want to do this.
Have to, but
they actually do have to. It's like government mandate. Get mad at at the elites, who are writing the laws, who are writing.
There's a restaurant here on H Street, neighborhood where I used to live, that has been quiet, sort of not so quietly. They are not enforcing the vaccine mandate and the mask mandate, and they've been fined. And so they started someone started a GoFundMe for them, and I donated. Awesome. I encourage you all to donate.
Good for you.
You can Google this. I don't want to call more attention to them or get them in trouble, but you can find it if you're interested.
No, we have that in New York too. It's like known which restaurants are owned by Republicans. You can go there and you can find people of color there, who are vaccine hesitant, and
No, for lunch I usually go to this one pizza place that I know they're pretty lax about this thing. They're not going to force it. So I'm like actively filtering my lunch options for like the least health and safety conscious restaurants I can find.
Totally.
2022.
2022, man.
What a year. Well, our rising panel will be around next. Stick around for that.